Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. I'm guessing that, like me, you have a Netflix account. And like me, you may have wondered, how does it know what I will like? With more than 200 million households and over 500 million viewers in 190 countries, Netflix has become an international phenomenon. Part of the company's huge success has been its ability to advise us on what we will like by suggesting titles. And in this interview, you'll hear that the company scraps traditional marketing and demographic information when making its predictions of what we will like. Instead, the company uses sophisticated, objective measures to determine what it will suggest, and it doesn't factor our age, gender, or other typically used data when rendering its recommendations. And someone who knows how Netflix does what it does is the company's vice president of product, Todd Yellin. Todd has played a significant role in Netflix's success for the past 15 years and was part of the team that created the original algorithms to predict how we will rate a title we haven't ever seen. Todd is one of the most compelling people I have known. In addition to being an executive, Todd is a great storyteller and filmmaker. As a cinephile and TV geek who is fascinated by how people make decisions, I have found talking with Todd and getting to know how Netflix operates to be a total delight. So listen in as Todd and I talk about how Netflix helps us decide. Todd Yellin, welcome to Super Psyched.
I am very thrilled to be here. I'm a fan of the podcast. I'm glad it's gotten off right at the right time. So my pleasure, Adam Dorsey.
Oh, thanks so much, Todd. And I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'll be talking about that later, both at Netflix and in your artistic pursuits. Let's just first start with the fact that you are VP of product at Netflix. And I was wondering, for us muggles who dwell outside of Netflix, what does that entail?
So let's put the metaphor as a relay race. We have the content team at Netflix, and they're responsible for finding the best video storytellers around the world, movies, TV shows, and getting us produce all of the content we have on Netflix. Then we take the baton in that race, us in product, and what we're trying to do is create the best experience around all those movies and TV shows. So, oh my God, with thousands of titles, we put in front of people. How should it be presented? How can we have the best sound and video quality around it, and so forth? How can we innovate at the intersection of the content created and the technology that's available in this new brave world of internet TV?
So in other words, it's a fairly simple job. And I'm joking. Obviously, this sounds so utterly complex and such a big problem to solve for 190 million users. That's absolutely incredible. From where I sit, Netflix could actually be considered a massive social science lab for psychology as it pertains to decision science for individuals and groups. Is that consistent with your perception?
Okay, don't look at it as a lab. I totally get the analogy here. And so I'll try to make the bridge that you're getting towards, Adam, which is obviously we're an entertainment company that's leveraging technology in a way that's revolutionized distribution of that content. And it enables things to be done that haven't been done before. So when you're talking about decision science, in the ways that we grew up back in the stone ages of entertainment, no insult to your age, more of an insult to mine, I think I'm a little older than you are, where things were you had a few channels. You didn't have many choices. And then it became cable. And then you had dozens of channels and then hundreds, but channels that were pre-programmed, and you pretty much got decided for you what was on from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, etc. Now, in this age of the internet, and it's not only in movies and TV shows, you know, the world I've resided in for a long time, it's in the world of news and music and whatever pursuits you're going after on the internet. My God, there's so much information. So for us, there's so many titles you can watch. And so how can we, when you talk about that decision science side, it's how can we help make it easier for people to find something great to watch when it can get overwhelming? I'm like a cinephile and I know movies forever. So a movie that almost probably none of your listeners have seen is an old movie. You might have seen it though, because I know you love movies. Moscow on the Hudson.
Oh, for sure. Of course. Robin Williams.
Yes. There's a scene in there. So he plays a Russian immigrant to the US who has never, and this is back in the old Soviet Union days, you know, the legendary long lines to get toilet paper. And I'm not going to go into the relevance in today's world, but the long lines to get toilet paper and like scarcity of goods. There's this scene in that movie, my favorite scene in that Paul Mazursky film. He walks into a supermarket and talking about decision science. He's overwhelmed. He's never seen anything like this. He sees 500 kinds of cereals and 15 kinds of toilet paper and 8 kinds of milk and 15 kinds of juice. And he just faints in the aisle because he's overwhelmed by the choice. And so the internet is like that exploded, where now you have so much choice that it's great to have all these options, but then how do we help people find the right thing and make those right decisions?
Yeah, and I know you and I are both a fan of Barry Schwartz, who wrote The Paradox of Choice. He was a former guest on my show, and he describes the conundrum of more options equals more difficulty in actually making a choice. And one of the things that I know that you've done to try, at least participate in, to try to solve for that was you helped create an algorithm to predict what they might like. And it seems very respectful of their one non-renewable resource, which is their time. You can lose your health and get it back. You can lose your money, get it back. But you can't lose your time and get it back. And one of the things that somebody interacting with Netflix is saying, I'm investing in the happiness of my future self after I watch this. Will I be stoked that I saw this? Will I not? And how have you attempted to really help guide people towards what they might actually like?
So what we try to do is, it's not like mathematics taking over the world and so forth. We're respectful of privacy. We're respectful of collaborating with our many members to make the best experience with them. So how we get to what we want to get to is we are basically understanding what people tend to watch and what they tend to like. And so the way we see that, the obvious signals you get from someone is the second you hit play, we understand a lot of, Adam showed an interest, or Todd or anyone else showed an interest in that kind of title. Whether they like that kind of title, the next step is, did you watch 2 minutes of that title, or did you watch 30 minutes, or did you binge on a show and watch the whole 10 episodes in a weekend? And then what did you watch before that? What did you watch after that? Did you use the thumbs up and thumbs down functionality to tell us, you know what, I need to express even more what I thought of this, and then thus we can get a little more information. And we take that, and we take that information, we take the understanding, we take your collaboration, if you thumbs up, thumbs down, how much you watched, when you watched, even on what device you watched, and then understand, like, my God, the typical user comes to Netflix, and what they're going to do is they're not going to look at hundreds of titles. You don't have that much time. And like you said, time is precious, and we're trying to help along that dimension. So the average Netflix member is going to look at 40 to 50 titles, and that's it. They're going to scan a couple of rows. They're going to see what's going on. And this is assuming they're not in the middle of binging Bridgerton or Better Call Saul or whatever they're watching. So they're going to look at 40 or 50 titles, and they're not even going to look that deeply at them. They're going to look at them for like 1.5 to 2 seconds on average each, really quickly glance at the synopsis, glance at an image, and then decide, what am I going to watch? And we call that moment the moment of truth. And the moment of truth is there's so many options of what you could be doing in any given time. Not only you have all these choices on Netflix, you've decided to click on the Netflix app. You can click on another app. You can read a magazine. You can check your social media. You can go talk to your kid. You can go for a walk. You can do a lot of this stuff at the same time. And so basically there's so much you can do out of those choices. So it's incumbent upon us, based on what you understand, for those 40 or 50 things you're going to glance at, to put the right 40 or 50 there. And so here's a couple of errors that are made on the internet that I call them amateurs' mistakes that unfortunately big companies are sometimes making. When they make those 40 or 50, or whether it's news, whether it's music, or whether in our case, it's video entertainment, they get lost in a world of, you have shown an interest in this one particular thing. So I am going to blitzkrieg that kind of thing at you and show you everything like that. Now that can get very dangerous in the news space, but let's talk about something that's a lot lighter in the entertainment space. In the entertainment space, I'll give you what it would mean to us, much headier and more serious and profoundly maybe dangerous in news. But for us, it could be, say you come to Netflix, you're a brand new member, and you decide, I'm in the mood to watch a romantic comedy. So you play a romantic comedy. If it's a series, you binge it. If it's a movie, you watch it in that sitting and you liked it. And even if you thumbed it up, so that's a double signal, you watched it and you gave us a thumbs up. The amateur's mistake would be if the next time you came to Netflix, everything on top of your user interface would be all romantic comedies. We just go down that rat hole of reflecting back, in a way, everything in that way. Now you could see in the entertainment world, what would that mean? Well, the stakes aren't as high. So that would just mean like, we have no idea. Do you like nature documentaries? Do you like sci-fi? Do you like wacky comedies? Do you like, gritty horror? What do you like? We don't know any of that. We're not even sure you love romantic comedy. We know you like that one title. But what happens is then these algorithms, they overly exploit that signal. And so we don't make that amateur's mistake. What we'll do is, and what we've learned over the years is, out of those top titles we're going to show you, of course, a few are going to be romantic comedy. Let's see how much you're interested in that. But then we're also going to go like, does Adam like political documentaries? Who the heck knows? We got some really good ones on Netflix. Does Adam like some anime? Who knows? Let's throw a couple up. Does he like action movies? Let's throw a couple of them up. And let's keep on exploring with you and allowing that serendipity to happen. At the same time, we're taking a look at the signal you told us and mixing that in. And there is the art that complements the science.
And I love that Netflix is acting like a really high-tech sommelier, presenting what we would probably like and what we also might like to expand our horizons. And I think that's brilliant. You said something that just blew my mind. You mentioned 4 factors that go into a person's decision-making process of whether or not they will watch a thing. They are escape, expanding horizons, social currency, and stuff to watch while you're doing something else. I was wondering if you could unpack those, because these are relevant to so many things. And I think it's such a pithy finding.
Using the precepts you talked about, that I've talked about historically, about why do people watch things, is core to help us understand how to please our members so they keep on subscribing month over month. So yeah, there are multiple reasons. It's pretty basic, but it's important, which is, sure, a lot of times, why do you watch something? You watch something because, damn, I had a hard day. Oh my God, the boss was on my case, or I had a fight on the playground and I was bullied, or God knows it's tough out there in the world. And so being in the entertainment business, sometimes a reason for them to watch Netflix is just to escape.
Totally.
I just want to get away from what was going on. And I want to be either in a universe far away, or I want to be in a country across the ocean, or I just want to be with people that aren't my family, even if they're just as dysfunctional as we are. I want to see their problems and not my own, and get invested in them, because I just want to take myself out of it. And so what escape is for different people, it can be a sci-fi or fantasy title, but it doesn't have to be. I might watch something like my movie, Brother Shadow, even though it's a gritty, low-key drama. I might watch that just because, well, they're not my family, they're not my job, they're not this, so I'll get invested in their problems, and their world takes me out of my own. So totally. Escapism is important.
Yes.
Sometimes we watch something for edification. We just want to keep on growing as people, and we want to learn something about the world. And so often the obvious thing is, if I'm going to watch like documentaries, I'm watching a documentary because it's like, oh, wow, I could learn something really interesting about this country or this administration or this latest development in science, or how does the internet really work, or whatever the heck it is. But sometimes edification could be something a little more subtle. It can be transporting into those other lives and understanding, I I never thought a marriage could work that way. That's not like my marriage, or I never thought like raising kids. Sometimes that stuff, the same title could be both escapist and edifying. And why you watch it in that moment could be very different reasons. So these kinds of things, they're important. But I'll tell you, a big one we all know is sometimes you just watch something for that social currency. I'm going to be in the office tomorrow, and I know everyone else is going to be talking about, I don't know, Cobra Kai or something, or whatever is hot with whatever people are talking about. And so I want to be in on that conversation. And that conversation might be with the kinds of people I hang out with. I hang out with a bunch of cinephiles. We're going to want to watch Mank and talk about the black and white Fincher movie about like the making of Citizen Kane. Whereas a lot of people, it's like, that has had zero social currency. In the groups I hang out with, that has a lot of social currency, and I want to be in on the conversation. Sometimes because I'm passionate and I love that title, and sometimes I don't want to be left in the dust when everyone in the cafeteria or everyone at the cocktail party are talking about something. I don't want to be the quiet one sitting in the corner not knowing what the heck they're talking about. So that's super important also, and that's another reason people watch it, and they watch things, and they all crisscross, and then the least interesting out of the four things you mentioned that I've talked about before is I'm folding the laundry and I just want something going on in the background to keep me company. I don't want to get rid of that use case because it's important. Some people, honestly, you're lonely and you just want something playing while you're cooking or what's going on, and you want voices in the background so you don't feel so alone. So it can be profoundly important. It's just harder to please that because what kind of content do you make for background? Light, unscripted content? I don't know. But those are the four types.
I love that. And as a cinephile, I think it is not a great idea to watch while folding laundry, that all attention should be mindfully pushed into the realm of the director and the artists who made this beautiful thing. But let's talk about FOMO for a second, because that is social currency as you describe it. I'm wondering how FOMO might have changed in the face of COVID. Now that we're not meeting at the water cooler, how has that aspect of people's behavior, are you able to infer any data that suggests that things have changed in COVID?
It's interesting because in terms of overall Netflix, and let's expand past Netflix to streaming entertainment over the internet, that has, let's call it, expedited a lot of change. So what that change is, and I'll get back to FOMO in a second, but what that change has been is obviously that's expedited where the world is heading in entertainment, which is more and more people are watching the grandest kind of video entertainment right at home. Big, large blockbusters, whether it's from us at Netflix or our competitors, are being released suddenly instantaneously at your home. Things you would have had to wait 9 months for that would have been theaters. Bam, you're seeing something huge and majestic, $100 million movies that we're producing and others right away. Now that more and more people, if you look at the statistics, the number of hours that people are consuming from streaming entertainment during COVID has really gone up. And I don't think this is going to be, a temporary change. I think this is just expedited where it was going anyway. And that's the way it's going to be in the future. In terms of FOMO, this is a complicated one that I'm not going to claim to be any expert on, but I'm just as curious as you are, which is, in the age of social media, what does FOMO mean? And it doesn't necessarily mean that I always have to be at the cocktail party or at the cafeteria. It just means that, I'm watching my two teenage kids and they're much more the future than either of us. And the FOMO is all about their friends that they're contacting when they're like buried in their bedrooms during a time of COVID. And so that FOMO is just as much there during COVID. In fact, talking about expediting, I think once again, even on social media, it's expedited that because our kids, I know you have kids that are similar ages to my kids, they are caught in a world where that is their connection. And that kind of connection is so much faster and so much more immediate and more diverse and more spread out than you can ever do with how many people you could literally and physically see in person. It's interesting.
Such a great point that social media brings on a different salience, perhaps even an expedited salience of FOMO that would be perhaps even less relevant at the water cooler, the proverbial water cooler. Let's go into one of the other aspects that you mentioned that I love so much. I know that my life has been vastly improved by movies and TV series and even specials like the ones that they show on Netflix. I'm wondering personally, how has your life been edified by film, and what might be a film or a couple of films that have made a marked improvement in your life. I'll even be happy to share a couple of mine with you if you tell me yours.
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely show you mine and show you yours. Let's do it, Adam. Oh, my God. This will get me on an endless string the heck out of your listeners. So we're going to do this quickly because I've been a movie lover forever through my life in so many ways, thinking more deeply about things. So I'll bring up a particular thing because I'm on now a whole bender with my kids. You know, I drive them crazy, but I try to show them as many movies. This is part of the education. My kids are 14 and 16. And so I show them a ton of movies whenever I can get them, wrangle them in. And it's a lot easier during these times of lockdown and so forth. And so I tend to watch even more with my 14-year-old son. He's a more willing audience, but my daughter will watch stuff. And sometimes I get Jen, the whole family to do it. But one I watched with my wife, Jen, she had seen these before, but I was excited to show my daughter. My son had no interest, so we got the closed bedroom door. But what we watched is the Richard Linklater Before Sunrise, Before Midnight movies. I've always been a fan, and to share something that's really moved you with your kids, that's a special experience in this time of my life. And that's one of my favorite things to do. And so those movies, just for those who haven't seen those movies, and I highly recommend it. The first one was made in 1995, and it was a young Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and they met randomly on a train. He from America doing the whole Eurail pass thing, and she's French. And then they spend one whole night together in Vienna. And, you know, it's like a young love story, but it's a very cerebral one. And their conversations are fantastic. And they probe deep about the nature of relationships, but they do it from the perspective of people in their early 20s.
Exactly.
Then he made a sequel film 9 years later where they lost touch entirely and they get back together. And now you see what is life like, and it has a lot more stress and a lot more friction and a lot more challenges when you're now in your early 30s. And so then you flash forward, and then he made another movie. So we're aging with the actors 9 years later called Before Midnight. And now you find they're married and they have kids, and now they're in their 40s. And you see the strife. It's a hard film to watch, Before Midnight. But boy, for those who've been through it, and I've lived through my own share of this kind of thing, it is just such a telling longitudinal study of relationships. And to share all the wisdom that Linklater had with my daughter, and to watch it with my wife as well. And we've been married for 20 years and been through that kind of journey.
Absolutely.
Was profound.
I couldn't agree more. It's funny how his name is Richard Linklater, because he literally links later, both in his Before series as well as his Boyhood, which I actually did have the pleasure of sharing with my children. And both of them absolutely were blown away. I mean, he's so profound. So yes, Richard Linklater would be a guy who was definitely provide edification in my life. I'm actually thinking of two really funny ones that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Rocky 2 that I saw when I was 11, I was bullied, and it actually inspired me to start lifting weights. And it made a measurable difference, and it became the Rubicon, the demarcation point between my having been bullied and my having not been bullied. So just by watching Rocky, the underdog, go through that kind of hell and with that kind of music. The other one, though, which is really funny, I had been in a very rough relationship with a profoundly critical woman. Just after we parted ways, I watched Something About Mary, and there was something about her levity that inspired me to think, oh my gosh, there is light out there. And lo and behold, that is what I found. That, you know, one of the things that we can do when we're in a relationship is we can globalize and imagine that all relationships are like this. And something about the goofiness of watching Ben interact with Carmen, because of course we're all on first name basis in those movies, was really inspiring and enlightening.
Yeah, it's funny. Not shockingly, I have a deal with my son. Like I said, he's 14 and he's really open to watching all kinds of movies, but we have to alternate. I will show him a raunchy comedy, and Something About Mary was part of the canon of good raunchy comedy. Superbad was his favorite. I'll alternate those, and then he'll watch a drama with me. Like I just showed him There Will Be Blood, which is a great movie.
Wow.
And so we watch heavy stuff together. So I'll go back and forth. We'll watch some wacky Seth Rogen thing or Something About Mary or Superbad. and then we'll watch a There Will Be Blood or something along those lines.
So when you were watching There Will Be Blood, I got to ask, did you DoorDash something from Shake Shack? Anyway, you guys didn't.
You know your movies.
You didn't drink milkshakes. Anyway, couldn't resist. It was just right there. But you and I both love this. So, Todd, as you have gleaned user data from large numbers of users, currently 195 million people, what have been some of the surprising findings you found about people's behaviors? And I'm wondering if there are some universal findings that apply to all, or at least close to all, 190 countries you currently serve that kind of tell us a little bit about the human story in general.
I'll tell you my favorite, and you might have heard me say this before, but it means a lot to me in a good way of how I view people, which is my favorite finding. And I found this was early on in my Netflix career, some testing I directly did when I was a product manager here at Netflix early on, was we were trying to solve that problem we talked about before, putting the right title in front of the right person at the right time. And so the obvious way you would think to do that is if you just find out basic demographic information about them, find out their age and gender, and then you can have a good leg up on understanding what their taste might be. I mean, you would imagine if it's a 19-year-old male, you would understand a lot more than if it's a 65-year-old female and everything in between. And I loved when we discovered through testing that is totally not true. That is the worst kind of stereotyping. It's what you like to see. You would suspect that data will tell you, oh, that's unfortunate that these stereotypes actually have so much truth in them, but they don't. And you know what? It's useless information to gather. And marketers have been doing it for years. And the hell with it. It's not worth it. Please don't do that anymore. It's superficial information because there are teenage males who will like a sensitive, moving, romantic title or a documentary about wedding dresses. And there are women in their 60s who will like a violent horror film or superhero adventure. And it doesn't matter. And it's individual taste that matters. And it's much deeper than just that surface level. Oh, that's what they must like because this is the kind of person they are. And so it helps us get past that. And that excited me. So we haven't collected that kind of information in forever because it's pretty close to worthless.
And it's somewhat iconoclastic, to use a term that you love, to break that previously held idol that we can superficially assume that because of certain demographic info, we can therefore guess that they will like this, that, or the other thing. And it sounds like you've been delighted by finding that it's altogether untrue.
Yeah. First off, I'm delighted in several ways. I'm delighted from the more short-term, say, mercenary way, but to make the experience better for Netflix members, which is my job. And now I know, don't bother them. Don't pull on their shirt and ask them to give you that information because any more work you want to give them is not good for an entertainment service. But I also like it from a humanity point of view, which is stop pigeonholing people based on the most superficial attributes. Really understand who they are, not what you think they are based on a quick glance.
And pivoting on that idea of assuming who a person is, somebody meeting Todd Yellin, VP of product at Netflix, might just assume that you went and got your MBA instead of your MFA and might assume that you have no creative background, which you actually do have. You've gone to film school. You've created a real film in which you directed Judd Hirsch in the movie you were describing, Brothers Shadow, which, by the way, is deep, dark, and psychological. And I highly recommend it. And it's available on Netflix. You can watch it if you're a subscriber. And you've also you've participated in a documentary about Tibet. And you've helped contribute to storytelling. And I've even watched you tell stories to children. You are a storyteller. And I'm wondering, how has your background as a storyteller kind of aided you as an exec in the business realm?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Thanks for asking it. Makes me pause for a second, which is hard to make me do because I tend to be very...
You're from New York.
Yeah, I am from New York. We move fast. It's affected me in a few ways. And it is an odd, you got your chocolate and my peanut butter kind of moment of taking the creative side of my life and then combining it with the more mathematical side of my brain and the more analytical side and getting me to the position I am now at Netflix. Okay, let me start on a few angles for how that's come together. One of them is the obvious, which it keeps me very energized to leverage technology to revolutionize storytelling and realize that after years, that is my impact and my place in this universe. And so that took time. It was an unexpected turn. But if I wasn't so passionate about storytelling and entertainment, I wouldn't be in Netflix for all these years. I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing. But that matters to me. Another thing is just basically as an executive, and this is something I could help my team with. When you're a product leader or any kind of executive, communication is one of the most important parts of your job. And as you know, probably at least as well as I do, storytelling is what really will land in someone's brain and make things stick. Not just throwing data at them, not just throwing factoids at them, but weaving together a story that as a human they could identify with will make something stick a lot more. So if I'm presenting on the most perhaps seemingly dry topic to a crowd of people internally at Netflix or whoever I'm talking to, if I can put it in the form of a story, a beginning and middle and end with characters in it, things you could identify with, then you will lean a little more in your seat and you'll remember it and then you'll talk about it with others. So that is something important, I think, as an executive.
And I know that you've really worked that part of your brain. And I think that you just nailed it. The idea of being able to convey something dry with the four most magic words in the history of mankind, which is once upon a time. That right. Gets everybody's attention. And you're quite good at it. Not just quite good at it. You might take issue with me saying this, but you are legitimately masterful. You've also described...
I take issue.
Sorry. Yeah, just deal with it. That's my assessment. You've described yourself as an iconoclast. And I was wondering if you could say what that means to you and how it plays a role in your work.
I'll leave it to your field to tell me why. But I don't know if it was I was hit in the head or it's genetic makeup or it's something that happened in my childhood and we could figure that out. Yeah, I've always been kind of rebellious. I have a little bit of a contrarian baked into myself. I question the status quo consistently. I just can't even help myself. It's more compulsive than anything. And I look at it like anything. I've embraced it at this age and this stage of my life. That's an attribute, damn it. And I'm riding with that all the way. And I think it's both a positive in my life. If I wanted to step away, it's a negative in my life. It's neutral in my life. It is what it is. But I do think of myself as an iconoclast. That's just, when I came out of the womb, that's just what my personality's been like. So if I'm going to stress the positive and be upbeat about it and be more charitable to myself, it just helps me question everything. And so that helps in innovation. You don't want to go with the status quo. You want to question things and so forth. And so I do tend to do that. I do tend to poke. I do tend to think of, wait, we're doing things this way, but how come we never thought about doing it this way? And what would happen if we did it differently? And so that has been part of my makeup. Now, like I said, it can be negative also. I've learned as I've matured to blunt some of those edges because no one wants to be around someone who's so disagreeable about everything. So you have to know when to press that button on your back and play that side of you. But I do have that as a reflex sometimes, that sometimes I leverage and sometimes I try to.
It's funny. There is a continuum of being skeptical and able to see things from a new angle, kind of the way Jerry Seinfeld might. And on the opposite end, of course, we've got Larry David, who makes himself unbeloved to many who come up in his path. And it seems that you've probably worked on those people skills so that you can convey. You also talk about the idea of being willing to fall on your face. And I love that idea because I think that we don't grow unless we do fall on our face. You say kind of more of a fall on your face one time rather than twice. But I was wondering, can you describe what does falling on your face mean and how does that help us grow?
Yeah. So I'll take it from the workplace, but you can take this personally as well. When you get too comfortable, and I'm going to get a little dark here, I think when you get too comfortable, you get that much closer to death because you're not challenging yourself. You're getting lost in that comfortable womb. And that's, as we get older, that's where we tend to want to go. More and more comfortable, less and less risk taking, more risk averse and going there. And I kind of say, you know what? Push yourself out of that comfort zone because that's where the interesting part of life is and you have to take some risk and so forth. So what I tell my team is we want to lean forward and take innovation. And sometimes you lean so far forward that you're going to fall on your face. And part of my job, that was part of my own MO when I was more of an individual contributor to the world. But now when I run a large team, I want to create as much safety as possible for that team to realize You're allowed to fall on your face. You're allowed to screw up. You're allowed to push things further than, you should have. Because if I don't encourage that, then they're going to play it safe, and we're not going to do things that are more and more challenging, interesting, and most of them will fail, but we'll never get to those breakthrough moments that will really, in our case, in Netflix, revolutionize entertainment. But in other cases, in our day-to-day life, we won't push ourselves to try something new, to do something interesting, to go like, oh, I hated that. I tried that. But oh my God, I would have never tried it. I loved it, and it just changed my life, and I want to do that over and over again. So you could I take it more from a leadership perspective, but I try to do it personally as well. Push myself out of my comfort zone, lean into risk, lean very far forward, and expect to fall on your face sometimes. And if I tell that to the team that it's okay to do that, then they'll try things and we'll help each other get up, dust ourselves off, and then try something else new.
And I'm guessing that many times you've learned to pivot, and your next move after the fail was amazing. I'm wondering, have there been any things that were ostensibly falling on your face, but they were actually more like the Post-it note or penicillin, where actually you fell on your face and it was great?
I can give you examples when I've fallen on my face and I actually failed. And I'll give you examples, and I'll use Netflix as the context of things we've tried here that I've led and pushed for. And then I'll tell you things that have actually succeeded, but it took some falling on the face to make it succeed. So first, I'll give you the one that I was just too early, trying things that were too aggressive and so forth. So I thought, this is going back early in my career, maybe around 10 years ago. I was convinced that, this content discovery challenge is so hard. Just like we were talking about before, if you can make it more palatable, more entertaining, more like a story, it'll help people pick the content they want to watch. So my idea was, when you use the word concierge, I literalized that and created Max, the talking UI. And so Max would help you find something. Max had a personality. We tried it on one of our devices. We tried it actually back then, a big streaming device for Netflix was the PlayStation. You could still stream Netflix on your PlayStation, but it was one of our biggest devices back then, maybe 8-10 years ago. And so we tried Max, the talking UI. And I tried, and we put a tremendous effort, and it failed. You can argue consumers weren't ready for it. The technology wasn't good enough. The implementation wasn't right. God knows why. But we tried, put a lot of effort, and eventually it was putting good money after bad. And I had to be smart enough to unplug that project, which takes a lot of discipline, because when it's one's own idea, when that was my idea.
Your baby.
Yeah, you don't want to kill it. And you have to have the discipline to sometimes say and show your team and stand up and say, I failed on this project. I'm not going to keep on chasing it down. We need to pull the plug and move on. So that's an example of leaning so far forward. I fell on my face. I needed to dust myself off, and we put that project aside. And Max, unfortunately, rests in peace. Then I'll give you another positive example. A positive example is something that also early days of Netflix streaming. Remember, when I've been at Netflix so long, I was here when those old-fashioned silver DVD discs were shipped in envelopes. Back in the day, for you youngsters out there, that's like Pony Express. But I was at Netflix back in those days. And so on the early days of streaming, we pioneered the idea of having an app on your TV set. There was no such thing as having apps on the TV. And we were early on working with some big companies like Samsung and LG and some of the game platforms. And there was like, oh my God, you can have an app and click on an app on your TV. There was no such thing. And so we did that, and that succeeded. And then once we started getting on the TV and your app on your TV, we started thinking, you want to get the best of both worlds when it comes to content discovery. We have this new great internet TV streaming model where you get this vast catalog and I can just click and play anything I want. But sometimes you have, like your past guest talked about, your choice dilemma of like, oh my God, I'm paralyzed with so much choice. Now, the beauty of traditional old-fashioned linear TV is I turn on the channel, and even if it's in the middle of the program, something's playing already. So I didn't have to make a choice. It's just, and it could be mediocre, but at least it's playing, and I could channel surf and things are playing in front of me. Whereas I am not getting that in internet TV, where I got to overcome that friction of playing something. So we thought about, how can we give you the best of both worlds? So we had the idea, or as we say internally and pretentiously, the hypothesis that we were going to try something that was a hybrid model, where we'd have an autoplay function where, sure, you can go through your rows and pick, I want that movie or I want to continue watching that show. Or you can go into a mode and we'll just based on what we know about you, we'll play something and autoplay it. We won't play it in the middle like linear TV, but we'll play it from the beginning and we'll see how it goes. And we tested that and it failed in 2010. And then it failed in 2012. And then we tried it again and it failed in 2015. And then we put it to rest for a while. And the early days, because I was earlier in my career here, I was very involved in those projects and very specific, working with the design team, working with the engineering team. But as it's gone on, my team continued on this quest because sometimes the way technology works, two things have to be there. It has to be, consumers have to be ready for it, and it has to work well enough. So it's not just getting the technology right, it's got to stream instantaneously, it's got to work. Consumers psychologically have to be ready they want something auto playing on Netflix. So we just tested it recently in 2020, and finally, eureka, bathtub moment, it worked. And so now that it worked, people will be seeing a mode in Netflix that it literally says on the user interface, at least its first incarnation, will say, play something. You'll get all the rows you get, and you'll get to choose if you want. But if you're I don't know, just play something, you'll hit a button, and that button it won't play randomly. It will play something that we think Adam will like or anyone else, but it will just play something, and it worked. And now that it worked, you'll be seeing that as an option on Netflix into 2021, and we'll get better and better on that feature.
I'm thinking about the inception of Netflix back in the late 90s, and it did start out with those silver thingies that were put in the mail, and how I first came across it in, of all places, Circuit City. I was there. They were giving out, free month memberships. And I remember the guy at Circuit City telling me, yeah, this company is definitely not going to make it because it's too good of a deal. And there's no way, from the financial perspective that it will be sustainable. And you said something earlier, that existential piece about death or evolving. And I think evolve or die has basically been something that Netflix has been willing to do. And you've certainly been a subscriber to that tenet. And I think that's been a part of the great success of why it is now a Fortune 500 company. That would be my hypothesis. And by the way, I would say that by definition, your pretentious use of the word hypothesis was actually very much on brand. That was a hypothesis that you were throwing down by definition. So I'm wondering, before I get to my final question, you've ridden highs, you've ridden lows at Netflix right now. It seems that things are really looking good in the future, but I'm just wondering what has caused you to be able to tolerate some rougher weather patterns in your career?
In the tail of my career at Netflix, there's definitely, when you make a movie, you have the low point for the character. When you're going for traditional screenplay mechanics, you're finding in that 2-hour story, what is the low point for your character? If you read script writing books, that's part of it. And so I'd say the low point during my career at Netflix was definitely, and this is a long time ago, it was around 5 or 6 years into my career. And it was back in, it was 2011. And it was the Quickster debacle. And so for those who don't know what that is, here's what happened. And this plays well into the theme we were talking about a few minutes ago about lean so far forward that sometimes you fall on your face and then you get back up and you dust yourself off. So credit to Reed, our founder and co-CEO at the moment. And Reed embraces risk, Reed Hastings. And he embraces risk, and that's been part of our keep on changing, keep on evolving. And that's why I've been here so long, because that plays into my own philosophy and his philosophy, and we gel well. And so sometimes, though, if you play into risk, you're going to roll snake eyes.
Sure.
And so what happened was the company knew, and this is even before I started, and this is well documented across wherever, that he decided to name the company Netflix and not DVD company, because he knew that the future wasn't in those silver discs. And this goes back where the world, when he started the company, the world, this is what internet video was like. It was the size of a postage stamp. It would continually rebuffer. It was really blurry. It was super low resolution. And there wasn't like the imagination of launching $100 million films in all their glory with better video and audio quality than you can get in most theaters. That was way in the future.
Right.
And so, but when he launched the company, that's kind of where video streaming was at. And that's why the company started shipping discs. But the vision was getting into streaming video. And so, you know, when I got here, it was all about shipping those discs and helping people pick what to add to what we used to call the queue, which is your list of movies and TV shows and discs that we were going to ship to you. And then we started, it was about a year after I started, where we started down the path of really rudimentary, free addition to that DVD service was a streaming service. But it was so, you know, subpar, we weren't going to charge for it. It was like developing it on the fly and giving it to consumers for free to keep on learning. And then it got better. And so we launched that in 2007, and it got better and better, and the catalog got better. And by 2011, we felt like it's good. It's time to lean into the future, lean very far forward. And so what we did as a company is we said, we're going to separate out our DVD service entirely from our streaming service. And they used to be, you know, very tied together as one subscription price. And we did the right thing, but the execution was off and we were being too aggressive into the future and the world wasn't ready for it yet. So we called it Quickster. I never liked the name, for the record, but we did the best we can. I'm not the naming branding guy. So we put out Quickster, which was the separate DVD company, and we were going to be Netflix streaming, and it was going to be two separate subscriptions. And the world wasn't ready, and consumers revolted, and it was too fast and too aggressive maneuver, to the point that SNL was doing skits, and they had someone play Reed, and he was, I forgot what kind of sweater it was. He wearing whatever sweater it was, he ceremoniously burned it in front of the company years later. But when he announced this whole Quickster move, he put it in. And his instincts were fantastic. It was just we were overly aggressive and too fast into it. And so we hit a nadir, and I was part of the executive team then, and I was newer to the executive team because I hadn't been promoted that much before then, maybe a year before then. And so those were tough times. The stock, it lost like 70 or 80% of its value over a number of weeks. And we looked across, and of course, the company was much smaller, but we still had many hundreds of employees. And the question was, who was going to stick with us? And were we going to get a lot of our teams leaving Netflix, thinking like, oh my God, this company is on its way down. This is the beginning. This is the first death knell for the company. And the impressive thing was, and this is how you learn from the toughest times and the low point of your character's story, is we knew that we had the right vision, but we also knew that we had to be super candid to people. And this is part of why I also like the company culture of transparency and so forth. So we were very honest with the employees across the company that we misstepped, not strategically because it was the right forward-looking thing, but in execution, too aggressive, too much, too soon, and so forth. And so we had very little employee churn. People understood that there was a longer-term vision. These were tough times, and this was a lot of hard conversations and a lot of emotion was going on back in 2011 at Netflix.
I imagine. So Todd, a fantastical and kind of futuristic question for you. Film at its best, as we've noted, can be edifying, can really help people change their life. If you as a filmmaker and as an executive of product could convey all of the goodness of film, what would be your wish for the future of filmmaking and the future of film consumption for all humanity? And what do you think might be the effects on the individual and perhaps even society at large?
Great question. This is how I think about it. And this is what keeps my passion alive, because when I got to Netflix, I was just in post-production on my film, and I'm going to be here 2 years and then I'm out of here because I'm going to continue doing other stuff. And I've been here for 15 years because one of the things around film, but I'm going to change the word from film and say video storytelling, because what is a movie and what is a TV show is getting more and more blurred. I'm encouraging that blurring. So are many of my colleagues and people who aren't here at this company, because it's just video storytelling. So what is that element for humanity and the future? I think it all comes down to diversity in storytelling. I think it comes down to what this vast distribution network can do is it can open, it has, and it needs to continue doing this because, boy, we got so many problems in this world based on this, is showing more and more people. I don't care from a gender basis. I don't care from a race basis. I don't care from a philosophy basis. All of the diversity that the world has to offer and normalize it so people can get past the superficial idiocy that really causes a lot of the world's conflicts, and that diverse storytelling helps people understand that, oh, they're kind of like me. And wow, this isn't so different. And now I have a basic understanding of who people are. And it's not based on that superficiality we talked about before. That's what I hope. And so what this vast internet distribution network does, look, the internet has pitfalls, huge pitfalls, scary pitfalls, but the internet also still has amazing promise. And that promise can be a vast distribution of me being able to see like, oh, there was a filmmaker from Brazil or Ethiopia or Germany, and I would have never seen their stories. And those stories with people who look different than me and who are different. That's what I think is profoundly the future of where this thing is going and the most optimistic view of it.
What a great answer. That idea that we could all find a common denominator in something that is ostensibly different from who we are. I'm thinking about even Slumdog Millionaire and how it swept the nation, and it acted as a bridge between seemingly different worlds. And I think that is one of the great powers of storytelling. And one of the things that we really so badly need to heal is finding the common denominator and through the virtues of humanity. Todd, I can't thank you enough for spending time and sharing your heart and your brain with our listeners. And this has just been a total delight.
Real delight for me, Adam. Thank you for having me on your show.
Right on. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.